Liverpool 2.0, they're back, baby! Or are they? Me and Jon Mackenzie are going to discuss whether Liverpool are back to their very best, because they used to be really good, and then they had a period where they weren't amazing, didn't get in the Champions League, and now they managed to draw with Man City, which I think is the first time they've not lost to them for a little while, and they were quite good. But the first thing we're going to talk about, because Jon Mackenzie's here, is how Liverpool press.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the pressing from the game at the weekend.
Because it's different from how they used to press, is that way?
I mean, it is slightly different, but I do think that the way that they press is very interesting in terms of, obviously it causes a lot of teams problems, but I think that in this game there was certain things going on which actually made it quite easy for Man City to be able to manipulate.
Because that might be because they know how they press, right?
Yeah.
In my head, it used to be like quite a narrow three with a three behind it like this when they were pressing high. But now it seems to be more of either Szoboszlai or Jones would join in the front, like a four like this, with a two behind. So it's like a 4-2-4.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it was very much a sort of passive front line. And we've talked about this before, I think, with then your midfield three behind. With the idea being that you're baiting these passes through into space, right? Which look really nice. You don't go close to the central midfielder and the opposition think, oh, nice easy pass inside the block, turn and jump from there.
Do you know what's funny about that is that when you think of Liverpool, we always talk about the high action pressing. In your mind, you're just pushing and chasing them all the time. But no, it's actually really
similar to Newcastle. We've talked about this before, right? They're quite. Newcastle are a little bit more aggressive, but they can end up with this very passive front line. And then when the ball ends up going back, that's the trigger for them to start being super aggressive. So the idea again here is that the ball comes in, everyone falls on it, and then ball played back, and that's the trigger. Then you've got the opposition moving the wrong way, and the same sort of thing is happening now, but what we're seeing is much more aggression from the eights. So the eights are often the ones who push out, like as you've said. You get maybe slightly wider on the forward players, the wide forwards, and then this opens up the space for then the two eights to jump up in certain situations. And the idea, I guess, is to be, if one goes forward, the other one should stay in the middle and help out McAllister or whoever's playing six. You end up with this almost like 4-2-4 shape. But the problem is that I find that quite manipulable because if you move the ball from one side to the other, and obviously Man City are very good at doing these sort of very rotational build-up sequences where they're moving players around and pulling opponents around with them. You can get into these situations where you're able to pull both of the eights forwards, and then you end up with this situation with someone like McAllister just covering a huge amount of space and City with all of their players sitting in the middle.
But then is the idea that with the new way they play, where they have the inverted fullback coming inside, is that meant to fill that space? Well, then they're meant to fill up like that? Is that what they're meant to do?
No, because out of possession, Alexander-Arnold is still just playing as a normal, as a fullback, right? So in the high pressing phase, Alexander-Arnold will usually be in these sorts of areas. Now, obviously, if you lose the ball higher up the field and you're in your possession phase, obviously he's going to be central, and so that gives a little bit more stability in the middle. But I just think in this kind of scenario, we've got a couple of things that Man City can do to actually cause problems. So Akanji in this game was doing the thing that we see where he jumps into midfield.
A libero.
Yes, that's right. And that obviously, like in that sort of situation, you're automatically moving the opposition player. Ederson fills the space. Then what we're seeing is maybe someone like Rodri dropping into the back line in some way, and then that pulling the player with him. So I've got a couple of screenshots just to explain that, because I think it's, in theory...
I love screenshots.
You do love screenshots. So here's the situation. Man City in their build-up phase, obviously playing this way down the field.
Well, this is dangerous because someone from the crowd has fired an arrow at that player.
There's two arrows actually pointing at the two eights.
Oh my God, there's two.
This shows you the setup that we're talking about here, right? Which is Liverpool with, here's Núñez, the striker, your two wide forwards, and then your two eights. And you can see that one of the eights has jumped up to press out because Akanji had the ball.
Yes.
So Curtis Jones in this instance has pushed right up the field. And Diaz has the ball here. Now what they're going to try and do now is try and manipulate this line so that it becomes much flatter, much higher up, and opens out space in the middle. So if we move the tape forward, we can see Akanji making that movement into the space. And now Curtis Jones is presented with a problem because Ederson is going to take his place as essentially a centre-back, right? And so Curtis Jones is going to stay on this side of Akanji and be aware of the fact that he might have to jump up onto the goalkeeper. The other thing that's going to happen now that move has been made is that Rodri is going to jump in to this space that's opened up, and that's going to pull Szoboszlai with him. And obviously when you do that, then you're manipulating that front line, and what we've ended up with now is all 5 of Liverpool's forward pressing unit in that line, and then this overload in midfield with the two 10s and then Haaland here and then Akanji here.
It's very clever, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of modern pressing is based around this idea that you try and manipulate these man-to-man scenarios where you're jumping up, making it really hard for the build-up. But the problem is that you're always going to leave that weakness in the second line behind you. So what we're seeing now is teams actually being able to manipulate the scenario so that in this instance you get all those 5 players forward. If you can force the opposition to do that, then all you need to do is find the space in the middle, and then suddenly you're able to run a fairly undefended back line.
So are you saying then that Liverpool's press is not as good as once it was, even though they do seem to be playing well?
Yeah, I think that it's certainly different from what it was. And if we look at the actual data, so this is a viz from a piece by John Muller in The Athletic.
Yeah.
And what he's doing here is showing you how well teams are able to progress the ball against certain defences. So this is Liverpool over the last 3 seasons. The more blue or purple that there is, the better they've been at stopping ball progression. And as you can see in this season, quite a lot of this more orange colour, so more progression is being allowed by Liverpool for the opposition around the line in their build-up and also in the space around here in the wide areas. And so obviously the pressing isn't quite as good as it used to be. And we spent the whole of last season talking about how their pressing wasn't that good.
Yeah.
In terms of ball progression, at least, it seems as though actually Liverpool still are allowing quite a bit of progression.
Then is it not, that might be strategic though, right? Because it might be that you let them pass a bit more so you create more space in behind, so when you win the ball in a deeper, so rather than a high press and it's maybe a mid press or whatever, so you leave more space to be able to attack into because they're very good in transition. Again, that's one of the things you can be better at. Would that not be maybe purposeful?
I think so. And every out of possession system is always like the opposite side of the in possession system, right?
Yeah.
So in this scenario, as you say, it may be the case that Liverpool are happy for the games to become a little bit more open because they're going to benefit from it. But I think what is clear to see is that what's happening here is that Liverpool are pressing in a different way to the way they have in the previous seasons, and in a way that's actually allowing that ball progression. And I think over the course of a Premier League season, I think if you allow this amount of progression, you're probably going to end up giving away big chances.
Then, of course, Liverpool's progressive passing might have been improved because they're getting Alexander-Arnold into central positions to be able to distribute the ball. Possibly that's one thing maybe that they're doing. So we see this thing where they do, the defence moves out to be more of a 3, and when they move higher up the pitch, when they get to maybe halfway, then the left back can maybe go over and do the overlapping runs when it's Andy Robertson. Maybe Tsimikas does it. But they have this 3. We talked in the past, there's a little bit of a problem when this player has to cover a lot of space over here when Alexander-Arnold's in transitional positions trying to get back to his right back position or when he's in the midfield. But you are getting a lot more progression from here, and of course he scored the equaliser against City in the game on the weekend, so that's obviously very good. But a good stat for you that I found, because we know they started doing this thing. I think they did it in substitute games, like late in games last season, but they changed it properly to do this system against Arsenal the end of last season in April, and since then they've played 23 games. Do you know how many games they've lost since then?
0?
1. And that was against Tottenham when they had, I think it's 2 red cards, or at least definitely 1. So it's working. They've won 15 games in the Premier League, this is, and they've drawn 7. So that's working. Is that the only thing that's different, that's made them better, John?
Well, I mean, I think this system is really interesting, I think, because like when we see fullbacks inverting, we obviously usually think of what is going on with Man City. And for Man City, a lot of that is about control and central progression through passing, right?
Yeah.
Because you have now your overload in midfield, and the idea being then that you're able to move the ball inside the block, do these bounce passes, move the ball through central areas and cause problems. But that's very much not what Liverpool are doing, I don't think, because I think what a lot of the data shows is that Liverpool may be a little bit more dangerous in terms of ball carrying when it comes to progressing the ball forward, which I guess presents other problems. But
as in rather than passing it direct, they're kind of carrying the ball to get the team up forward.
Yeah,
breaking lines with running rather than passing.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, and obviously we've talked about this being a meta in the Premier League more recently. That's something that Pep Guardiola has been allegedly trying to do recently by bringing in players like Nunes and Kovacic, etc., yes, and Jeremy Doku, of course. But the other thing we've talked a lot about when we've talked about this system is that if you invert your fullback and you make your back line into a back 3, how are you offering width in build-up? That becomes a problem. And I think one of the things that we've seen happening a little bit is you either have the width coming from your wide forwards who can then drop in, you get nice access between your centre back and your wide forward. That can be a nice way of progressing the ball. But when your wide forward is Mohamed Salah, you may not want him to be dropping in to help out in build-up.
Well, that's it as well. And if you think of Salah, he is more of a forward, not a winger. Like City's like true wingers is what you get, right? And that's the real difference, because you maintain that with all the way through. Mm-hmm. So then they don't have that. So
yeah. So well, the other thing we've started seeing is we've always sort of seen is that you can offer that width through the eights. I've got Jones and Szoboszlai the other way around because they were actually pressing in that way at the beginning of that game. But often what you'll see is Szoboszlai being the player who will move wide in order to help out to allow Salah to get further forward. But I think that this system, you know, in terms of when you play this approach and you're passing the ball a lot, produces the sorts of chances that you might not necessarily want Liverpool to generate. So in the past, I've been maybe a little bit quizzical about whether or not this is the best approach Liverpool could take. But I think what we're seeing is that with the ability to actually play quite directly and run with the ball, pull opponents apart in that way, that this may be a perfectly adequate way for Liverpool to be playing. They're not trying to play like Manchester City. They're actually trying to play their own game, but using this sort of structure as the basis.
In my mind, like Klopp, a lot of the things he wants to do with what we've referred to in the past as heavy metal football and high pressing, whatever, loads of terms we've used for it in the past. But it's about creating moments of chaos that you've created yourself, so you can be in control of it, even though by nature you can't control chaos, I suppose. Can you? Can you control chaos?
Yeah, I mean, well, technically there's a difference between randomness and chaos, right? Chaos means that there is some order there. Randomness means there's just no order whatsoever. So technically with chaos, I suppose you can control in some way.
It's what villains do in cartoons, isn't it? They create,
right.
I want to bring chaos to the earth, yes.
In the Joker. Well, going back to what we were talking about before with the out of possession stuff, if you are playing in this sort of system where you are moving maybe one of your eights out to provide width, for a team like Liverpool who are trying to, counter press in these sorts of areas centrally, moving one of your number eights out wide is, it does raise questions about whether or not your counter pressing is less.
Your movements and your positioning has to be absolutely. So if he goes there, then he has to go out there, or the other way around. If he goes in here, so everything has to be highly coordinated and orchestrated. So I guess when you get those single moments when they're not completely in tune, that's when you get little errors. You even see like tiny errors in coordination with a goal that City scored, where Matip and Van Dijk are just slightly out of tune. And that's what leaves a tiny bit of space for Holland to get into. I'll stay on ball progression, though, we're just talking about that. So one of the things I noticed is that when Jones come off, and they put on Gravenberch in the second half, now Jones is amazing out of possession, and I think we've talked about it before, is a huge reason for why Liverpool did so well, especially how they wins the ball back. But Gravenberch carries the ball a lot, so he can burst away, and the goal they score is a transitional moment, so it's them creating a bit of chaos. Well, they're not deliberately letting City try to almost score, but then they go on the way in the counter-attack, and the way they manage to break the line rather than passing is Gravenberch carries it beyond the player, and then that's basically what breaks the line, which gives them a little bit of an opportunity to come forward. But I guess as well as this shape we've got here on the pitch, this also would allow normally one of the centre-backs to have the ball, and so therefore they'd be able to carry it, and that's part of what they do. Yeah, so I've got another couple of screenshots here as well, where I wanted to show how the way that they're able to actually break lines is through carrying. So we've talked already about usually when a team inverts a fullback into the middle, often that is designed to be able to pass the ball through and generate these sort of dangerous moments where you're running at the back lines in terms of just through quick passing. And it's obviously difficult because you're in the middle of the block, so you have all of the team around you making it harder. So you need players who are really good in tight spaces, good on the turn, etc., etc. And Trent Alexander-Arnold probably isn't that kind of player, right? So obviously, Liverpool aren't trying to do that as much. They're not trying to get Trent Alexander-Arnold inside the block, picking the ball up and doing these quick bounce passes. But what we are seeing is actually, as you said, really nice examples of using ball carriers to pull blocks apart, because that can cause problems as well. Because if you are able to get a centre-back, for example, create space in the middle and then run, then all of those players who are being marked in the middle or the players who are doing the marking in the middle have to move around to adjust. So this is probably the best chance Liverpool created, I think, in the first half. And in this instance, you can see the Man City block really nicely set. They've got a couple of players inside, but rather than playing the pass through into the middle here, what we see is Joel Matip actually just runs through this gap. You've got Jeremy Doku here, and Jeremy Doku out of possession, I think, is still learning the ropes at Man City, and so actually leaves a little bit of a gap for Matip to get through. And you end up with this scenario now where you've got Matip, he's run right the way through that block now. You can see all of the players having to converge in this sort of area because Matip is posing a problem. You can see Diaz having to step forward. You can see Ake having to track the runner here.
that opens up space to play Salah in. Salah gets the ball, plays the ball into the box, and Nunes has a good chance on goal. So again, using ball carrying to generate these, to pull the block apart, rather than using quick passing.
They're not passing as directly as they used to. They're carrying the ball more. What else can we say about them? They seem to be much more dangerous on the counter-attack, even though they always were great in transition, but they seem to be creating more deliberate scenarios where they can do that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think this is the big question, is like Liverpool 2.0 is a lot about making games a little bit more transitional and doing that in different ways. So again, I've got some more viz here, I think that illustrates this quite nicely from John Muller's piece in The Athletic, which people should check out. But this is about like where you're controlling possession of the ball. So on this viz, where there's red areas, it shows that the team is in control, largely speaking, and then blue is when the opposition are in control. And I go over the course of a few seasons.
So red is Liverpool here?
Red is Liverpool in this instance, playing this way down the field. As you can see, the shapes are pretty much the same. Nothing's changed in that respect, but I think what you're seeing here is that
it's like a crab.
Where Liverpool are, yes, with its pincers out.
Yeah.
Where Liverpool are controlling the ball now has slightly shifted over the last few seasons, and obviously that comes from the fact that they are trying to move Alexander-Arnold inside more, so they're actually possessing the ball in this kind of area on the pitch. But as you can see, the higher areas of control in previous seasons, controlling possession, has actually dropped now a little bit deeper, which I guess means that they are going to be trying to create space to then run into in a different way.
That almost reminds me of like five-a-side. When people go into the corners, like you never score from there. I don't know why people do it. So you go into the corners, like you see last season when they weren't great and didn't even get in the Champions League. So that's when you go into the corners and trying to have fun there. But you have to go put the ball back in the middle, and by the time you do that, everyone gets back and blocks you, and it's hard to create. So you pull them back a little bit more. You focus less on having control in the wide areas because you can't score from there, and you use them more to create space for others in the middle.
Yeah, and I think in this instance, like because they're not able to control the ball as much in the opposition half, that would explain why they have to be maybe a little bit more transitional in order to get the ball into dangerous areas.
Have to be or want to be?
I think have to be, to be honest, because I think they would probably want to go back to that system where, remember Liverpool, the good Liverpool teams of the past, right, where you'd see the centre-backs like well in advance of the centre circle, squeezing the opposition into their half. That is useful for two reasons. One is you're controlling the ball far away from your own goal. You're controlling the ball around the opposition goal, so you're going to be more likely to generate chances. But also you're able to get that compression, which allows you to do the counter-pressing really well as well. So I think that what we're seeing from Liverpool is it's not quite to the level that they were in the past in terms of being able to control the ball, control games. But it's still very, very good. They've got a very good attack. Probably means they're a little bit more open defensively. But the big question, I think, is whether or not that can win them a title. But another viz here, just to show in terms of passing towards goal. So you can see in the past Liverpool were passing in these deeper areas more directly. So you can see the red boxes here means you're passing a little bit more directly versus indirectly. And you can see over the course of the last few seasons, Liverpool's passing has become a lot less direct. And I think that's probably because they are trying to use ball carrying a little bit more. I think that this is all very interesting. And one more viz, this is from the Opta guys, the analyst website. You can find this on there. This is their team sequence style. So on the bottom, you've got passes per sequence. So the more passes you have, you'll be in this area. And then we've got the direct speed in terms of the of progression on the other axis.
As in ball progression, how fast it goes from your goal to the other person's goal.
That's right. When you're moving towards the opposition goal, you're going faster if you're higher up the graph here. And as you can see, there's a general trend line here, right? Which is, the more passes you're doing, the more slow and intricate you're going to be. And generally, the teams that we consider to be the good teams will be in this quadrant versus the teams up here who are going to be a lot more to do with like counter-attacking and stuff.
You ever notice that people always say, like Guardiola says, there's not one right way to play. Yeah. We always think of the right way to play, like the West Ham way or the Man United way is always to have the ball and keep it like that.
Yeah, right. But I think Liverpool sort of stand out here because as we've said already, right, they're not doing as much passing. You would expect them probably to be further this way on
I would have thought they were closer to where Newcastle and Spurs are,
but they've got that direct speed as well. So again, this all seems to suggest that they're generating a lot of speed in their build-up play just through ball carrying as well. So yeah, I think this team sequence style is quite interesting because it's putting Liverpool in an area of the graph where you wouldn't necessarily expect a team that are challenging at the top of the table to be in. And I think that's the interesting question. Is this play style
because it's too loose that when you play?
I think so, yeah. Because you're relying then on, if you're going to be more open, then the possibility is that oppositions can score against you, right? And Liverpool at the moment are relying on the fact that they've got probably the most elite attack in the Premier League to sort of not bail them out defensively, but say we're going to score more goals than you.
It's like Keegan's Newcastle.
Yeah, and I think that's the big question, right? Is that we've come from we're in the middle of an era where control has been the watchword for the teams who are generally going to win the Premier League. Even when Liverpool were winning the Premier League, again, they moved away from that really heavy metal football to a bit more of a control model where they were able to squeeze up the field and hold the ball, and they weren't going as direct as they were. The big question now is whether or not Liverpool can shift back to, because it feels as though they're shifting a little bit more to original Klopp.
Would you argue that you have to play more like the teams round about here in order to win a title?
I don't think that you necessarily have to. I think it can be done, and football is always evolving. So it may be the case now that because Liverpool have much better players than they did in that early Klopp iteration, that they may be able to get a lot of joy. But I think for me, I always kind of think consistency is the most important thing when it comes to winning league titles. And I think with the game being a little bit more open, you're going to be less consistent.
Well, it's defence that wins you titles, in theory, right, rather than attack. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we've got Arsenal, on the other hand, who are very much the opposite of Liverpool in that respect, where they've tighten things up defensively. And the big question in all of their games is, are they going to score a goal? So we've almost got both of those arguments being made at the same time as Man City are still doing their thing. So it's going to be an interesting title race from a stylistic point of view.
So I guess Liverpool 2.0 is kind of a solution to problems that they had last season. We've seen where they changed from where they're controlling the ball, how they're moving it forward, and how they're pressing. And whether it's because that's exactly how they want to play or because of how they have to play, they are now not losing games. They've only lost one, remember, since they changed to this sort of system, which I believe is the design of Pep Linders, who took it to Klopp and told him this is how it would work. And so what we've probably got is not Liverpool 2.0, but more like Liverpool version 3.9, final version.
Underscore. You've got to have some underscores in there.
Final draft, this one. What else you put the end of yours? Definitely this one.
Capital letters, brackets. Actually this one.
And then you just have just use this one, final draft, or final version 3.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.